telephone interview with microwave specialist Dr. Barrie Trower. Part 1. Destruction of humans, animals, and nature by 5G radiation. Since Tuesday, March 19, 2019, the auction of frequencies for the new 5G mobile communications standard has been in progress in Germany. Frequencies in the 2 GHz band and in the 3.6 GHz band will be allocated. Compared to the other mobile radio generations, 5G will emit significantly shorter microwaves. Data will be transmitted at least 100 times faster than with the current 4G networks. While 5G is being promoted as a future technology with a huge growth market, many people are worried about what this high-frequency microwave radiation will mean in terms of radiation exposure for humans, animals, and nature. One who has been intensively involved with the dangers of microwave technologies is the British microwave expert Dr. Barrie Trower, a former specialist of the Royal Navy for the development of microwave weapons. KLA-TV was able to conduct a telephone interview with Dr. Trower about questions on 5G and microwave radiation. In this first part of the interview, he reports on microwave warfare, which has been used since 1949. According to Dr. Trower, very short-wave microwaves such as 5G, also known as millimeter waves, can cause severe damage to the brain and nerves in humans. During his military career, he compiled a list of around 60 different impulse frequencies, which can cause around 200 different diseases in humans. Nowadays, the list has increased from 60 to about 750 different impulse frequencies. These have an effect on the approximately 1,500 proven biological structures in the body. The combined effects of the damaging frequencies have not yet been taken into account. Dr. Trower also explains why microwave radiation can cause cancer. He furthermore explains how animals and especially insects are endangered. Around 80% of insects pollinate our plants and thus ensure our food supply worldwide. Experiments have shown that microwaves destroy up to 90% of insect species within a few generations. The dramatic absence of insects already last year is a frightening testimony to this. Now listen to the interview with the microwave specialist, Dr. Barrie Trower. Part 1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trower, for taking time for this telephone interview about microwave radiation. Could you begin by briefly introducing yourself to our audience and telling a bit about yourself, how you became an expert on microwaves?
Yes, sir. And the other word I never use is expert. But being an expert in this field would require you to be an expert in medicine, physics, electrical engineering, mathematics, chemistry. You would need to be, you would need sort of 4 or 5 doctorates to be an expert.
I see.
I am a independent research scientist, and I will answer the questions I feel qualified in answering, but I'm uneasy with the word expert. But I will run through my biography for you. I took my first examination in this area, in microwaves, in 1959 for entry into the Royal Navy. I studied microwaves, all aspects of microwave warfare within the military, and a part of my work was on radar, and another part of my work was on, I was a diver, underwater bomb disposal used microwaves. And so throughout my military career, I was involved in studying microwaves virtually all of the time. When I finished, because the Cold War was on between the Soviet Union and the United States, I was asked if I would debrief captured spies from the Cold War who were using microwave weapons. It was a very small part of my work, But I did a little bit of it every single day for the best part of 11 years. My first degree is, I specialized in nuclear and atomic physics. My dissertation was written on microwave absorption. I have another degree in environmental influences on thinking processes, which also included microwave effects on the brain. I have a teaching diploma in human physiology. I'm the author of the confidential report for the Police Federation on the Tetra airwave communication system, which you have.
Yes.
I'm also the author of the higher confidential report for the senior police officers, again on the Tetra airwave communication system. I used to teach in my retirement advanced physics, some mathematics, human physiology, and currently I travel the world warning people about microwaves and their health, and answering questions like I'm doing for you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So in the past you were involved in military intelligence. At that time, how were microwave weapons used and for what purpose?
I wasn't employed by military intelligence, but I supplied information from one government department for military intelligence, and MI5 and MI6. But I was actually employed by another department. Microwave weapons were used from 1949. Microwave weapons were used, and they're still used today. They are used for, there are, in an adult, around 4,500 biological structures within the body and the brain which can be affected by microwaves. And microwave warfare involved in those days studying what frequencies and what pulse frequencies could change different parts of the brain, different parts of the body. For instance, there is one particular frequency that can collapse the bowel, another that can make you want to commit suicide, another that can give you cancer. So there were lots of frequencies to put in with, lots of pulses to put in with the microwaves. And microwave warfare, it is a stealth weapon which can be used to change the brain or any part of the body without the person knowing that they are being microwaved, because you can't see them, you can't smell them, all you feel is ill. So they are used for that purpose and can be used either close up or from a distance, a great distance, and they are also used for biological warfare as well.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's so that is really impressive. And now the question is, what is the difference between the weapons that were used then by the military and are still used today by the military and the coming 5G radiation?
Sorry, I'm just having a sip of my cup of tea here. Well, the difference is, and there is only one difference, in fact, 2 of the 5G frequencies are known lethal weapons. The problem is you can't actually tell the industry what they're putting out because they choose not to believe you. But it is published, and it's published in more than one paper going back to the 40s and 50s. And in fact, some of the earlier experiments, and I have the documentation, some of the earlier experiments on what is generally called millimeter waves or 5G, some of the experiments were carried out on humans to cause serious physiological damage and even more serious neurological damage. And one of the 5G, the top of the 5G frequency range at the moment has only just been tested and tried. It's called active denial. Its nickname is the growler, and it is for crowd control. And I do know that when it was tested on some of the military, it brought them down to their knees straight away. So, to answer your question, sir, what the difference between going back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, Cold War, and now, the only difference is they have become, microwave weapons have become more sophisticated and more accurate in aiming for trouble, making people particularly ill in one area of their body. And I'll give you an example. When I was debriefing spies, and may I say that I like to add, when I was debriefing spies, it was voluntary and it was done gentlemanly over a nice cup of tea or coffee. When I was talking to the spies, I collected a list of probably 60 different pulse frequencies that could induce probably 120, 200 different ailments, neurological and physiological.
Yeah.
Today, the current list has gone from 60 to around 750 different pulse frequencies. But it's not 750 where they can give you this one or this one or this one. It's 750 factorial, mathematical, which means you can have the effects of number 1 multiplied by the effects of number 2, multiplied by the effects of number 3, up to 750, or any combination thereof. So the answer to your question is today they are immensely sophisticated, and of course the electronics has grown with the sophistication because now they're operated by computers.
Yeah. In fact, let's stay a bit with this 5G system that is now about to be introduced, or supposedly will be introduced as a communication system between people in telecommunications and between objects. What would you say, in your opinion, what are the dangers, or how dangerous is this 5G radiation? And what are the main damages you would expect for humans and animals and the environment?
Yeah, it is not an opinion, so I can give you fact, because it is already published. They are a shorter wave, which means that they will cause more irritation towards, as far as humans go, you can expect a lot of damage to the eyes, the ears, certainly to the skin. The reproductive organs will be damaged. So it is going to be quite damaging to the surface area of the body. But the 5G doesn't just come on its own. It comes with other frequencies which will penetrate the body anyway. And this is already published. In terms of animals, it's already been seen that cattle have literally died in a field where it was being tested. And we're not talking a few, it's something like 100 cattle died in the field where they were being tested. Birds have been known to die near the transmitters, and it has also been published, written down, that it is particularly dangerous for insects. And when I say insects, I say arthropods or creepy crawlies to most people. But insects pollinate around 80% of the world's food supply. And experiments have shown that up to 90% of the insect species, or the arthropod species, will be wiped out within just a few generations. And the reason is, we're going into mathematics here, it is the surface area to volume ratio. The surface area of a flying insect is much greater than its volume, and you disrupt all of its antennae, all of its electrical sensing devices. You disrupt its ability to navigate. So you are going to find you're going to have to find a new way to pollinate plants. And there are already universities working on small drone insects that can replace the insects that die. And let's hope they're going to be successful. In terms of other animals, your farm animals are going to go, but the greatest disaster, which is often overlooked, well, two disasters to be precise. The first is viruses and bacterium, because for some reason, and I did have it explained to me by a professor, but his knowledge of bacterium was far outside my knowledge, and to be honest, I couldn't actually understand what he was saying, which is one of the reasons I do not consider myself an expert. But he convinced me with his knowledge that, and this has been experimented on and shown to be correct, bacteria thrive under microwaves. Now, whether they realize they are in danger as a species, and they can multiply a lot faster than we can, and they multiply in greater numbers continuously, the same as viruses, or whether for some reason they can absorb the energy and use it for greater multiplication, excuse me, I don't know. But you will find a greater increase in all viral and bacterial diseases. You will find that your crops will fail because particularly trees, shrubs, and bushes. And I can explain why, and this is experimentally shown. And this is particularly relevant to the million or so drones, balloons, and satellites that are intended to go up for 5G and the Wi-Fi. Trees are designed to capture radiation at all levels, as are shrubs and bushes. They were teaching themselves to collect radiation long before we even set foot on the planet. Now, when you start irradiating trees with microwaves, what you do is you weaken their resistance to bacterial and viral infection, and you destroy the photosynthetic mechanism whereby they make food. And a good example of this is the Site of Special Scientific Interest in Australia, known as the Nardi, N-A-R-D-I, mountain range. Now, It was a specific nature reserve and was deemed to be kept a nature reserve. The industry came along with their transmitters and went zonk, 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 and put up transmitters because they love putting them up on mountains. And there are, to my knowledge, because I've seen them, 135 papers now describing how the Nadi range in Australia is now dead. The trees are dead, the soil is dead, anything that could move has gone away, anything that couldn't is dead, and it is basically a wasteland. And if they don't take the transmitters down and move them away, which they're not going to, then it is just going to get worse and worse. And the bottom line, and this is published by the World Health Organization and the European Academy for Environmental Medicine, and they are not made up of idiots. And I've also seen it published for animals that in one of my papers, I published it quoting them, and within 3 generations of human, and this includes all of your Germanic species, and I am apolitical, but I make no difference to whatever country I'm speaking in, the color, the race, I make no difference. And I tell everybody the same. In your country, in Germany, I will guarantee, and it is a fact, and it is published and experimentally proven, that in 3 generations, if you do nothing, only 1 in 8 of your children, and this is the exposed children, which will be the entire population, only 1 in 8 of your children can expect to be born healthy. 1 in 8. When it comes to the animal species, although they have a shorter lifespan, it is down to 1 in 5. That is published by a scientific editor. So what I'm saying is a baby born in Germany today, when that child is around 60, 70 years old, and they look at the birth rate, or that child looks at the birth rate, you will be in the situation where only 1 in 8 of your births will be either alive, healthy, the other 7 out of 8 will either be dead or will have a genetic disease. That is published.
Wow. Yeah. The next point, I would like to have a look at this threshold values. I saw a study on the development of cancer in humans shows that weak microwave radiation, they had cases of 0.04 watts per kilogram and 0.4 watts per kilogram, that promotes cancer growth more than higher intensity radiation. They had 2 watts per kilogram. What is the use then of threshold values, and which threshold values do you think make sense?
I congratulate you on a brilliant question, sir. That is a very important and a very brilliant question. The answer is, it has been known, and this goes back to during the Cold War, when the Soviets microwaved the American embassy, and the levels of microwave going into the American embassy were incredibly low, and per percentage population, the United States Embassy, and even when you count the rates today, the United States Embassy has had the highest cancer rates per unit population in the world from that low level. Now, and I can give you a reason why this happens. When you have high rates of microwave irradiation, your body realizes straight away that you are in great difficulty. This goes back to when we lived in caves and we had to survive very severe lightning storms. You have proteins in your cells, for the scientists who are listening, you have proteins called protein 53 and the nuclear core complex. They are around your cells, and when your cells are under attack from microwaves or electromagnetic waves, then these proteins rush into action and they set mechanisms into action that will repair the cells and defend the cells. Now, when you have a low level, the problem is the low level, and in fact the lower the level, the more dangerous it is. And when you have a low level, it comes into the body as whole body radiation, and it isn't powerful enough to trigger the mechanism that will defend the body. And it may take 18 months, it may take 4 or 5 years, but the damage is being very, very slowly done. And by the time you realize that the damage is being done, then you already have the cancers. And the analogy I tend to use with this is going back to the Victorian era, when a wife wanted to get rid of a very, very bad husband, one of the common ways that a wife could get rid of a husband would be to just put arsenic into his food, a little bit of arsenic, which is tasteless, odorless, a little bit of arsenic in his food every day, and the husband would slowly become sick and slowly die. And that is really what it is like. In fact, when I'm at conferences and people say, what are the symptoms? I say, well, they mimic lead arsenide poisoning, because the arsenic destroys the body bit by bit slowly, and the lead destroys the brain bit by bit slowly. And this is what the microwaves will do. And in answer to your question, sir, there is no safe level. They do come up with levels that may be tolerable, but what they're saying is it's rather like smoking or asbestos or any other lead in petrol, lead in paint. What they're saying is that you probably won't feel effects for 20 or 30 or 40 years, but it is not harmless. But the profits to the industry are such that they consider that it is worth you facing that risk. And that is why microwaves are being used for communications. And it is published. And I have the paper, and the reason it is that microwaves are being used, and the instructions were from the US Defense Intelligence Agency, and I have that document, and it is to protect industrial output. In other words, industry's profit. So microwaves are being forced on people, and they are deliberately being forced. Smart meters are being put in your house, whether you like it or not, and they're being forced on people to protect industrial profit. If it were a legitimate experimental experiment, it would never pass the licensing ethics board as an experiment on humans. It's too dangerous. and that is published.
Yeah, to come back to, or to stay a bit with thresholds. Now, you described this mechanism that weak radiation is more dangerous than the stronger radiation, because the weak radiation doesn't trigger the defense mechanisms of the tissues. On the other hand, there certainly are also other effects that depend on intensity, so that very high intensities will be unhealthier than intermediate intensities.
It depends on the length of time. I mean, if you the limit for a cell phone, if you wanted to prevent cancer, and this is from the World Health Organization's Cancer Studying Research Department. If you wanted to avoid cancer, your greatest chance is not to use a cell phone if you are an adult for more than 27 minutes a day accumulative. So it would be a few minutes spread over each time, spread over a day, but certainly not more than 27 minutes a day. And I think then if you exceed that, I think you are then more than 40% or something likely to develop cancer, but you stand a greater risk of not developing it if you stick to 27 minutes a day. For a child, that is down to literally a few minutes, because children absorb 60, 70% more radiation than adults for various reasons, and the radiation can do around 75% more damage inside a child. So, in fact, there would be no safety level for a child, and there isn't one published officially around the world. For an adult, it's about 27 minutes if you must use one, but even in the handbooks you get with your cell phones, it warns you that there are lots of warnings concerning cancer and cell phones, and really they are not social instruments. They are really designed to be used in an emergency. They're not designed to be used for long conversations or any other purpose.
According to a report by the German business magazine Wirtschaftswoche, dated February 23, 2019, the Internet will soon be coming from space. Also, the international protest group Stop 5G on Earth and in Space writes that at least 5 companies intend to transmit 5G from space. This would be done with the help of satellites in low and medium Earth orbits, which would cover the entire Earth with strong, focused, and controllable beams. In the first part of the telephone interview, Dr. Barrie Trower, a former microwave weapons expert with the British Royal Navy, reported on warfare with microwaves that have been in use since as far back as 1949. In today's second part, he speaks about the technical possibilities and hazards of 5G from space. This second part continues with the questions of how humans and nature can be manipulated by microwave radiations. For example, by provoking moods such as hopelessness, aggression, and suicidal thoughts using different frequencies. According to Dr. Trower, the planned 5G internet from space will act to slowly destroy every plant and thus also the soil on Earth, because it is the plants that keep the soil alive. Dr. Trower also explains that it is mathematically and theoretically possible to trigger earthquakes by means of microwaves. Finally, Trower addresses the question of who is responsible for the coming 5G radiation and what technical alternatives we have. We urge you to also view our other programs on 5G and distribute them generously. Contact us if you would like to receive regular news about the further development of 5G and to be informed about activities in your area. And now, part 2 of the telephone interview with Dr. Barrie Trower.
Is it possible to manipulate people or control people's minds through microwave radiation like 5G?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You don't need 5G. You can do it with any G. That is that was the first use for them. And this research is not new. And when I say this at conferences, people sort of open their eyes and look at me as if I'd grown another head. This research was actually carried out and written up in 64 BC by a Greek scientist living in Egypt by the name of Ptolemy, spelled with a P, P-T. The Ptolemies were enormously clever scientists, and he would heat up different objects, and then he would make like a solid wheel and put it in front of people's faces and drill holes around the wheel. And as the solid metals or other ores that he would heat up, other substances, he would spin the wheel in front of their eyes with the radiation the other side of the wood, so the radiation would come through and in pulses go into the eyes and into the brain. And he wrote a paper on it, which is still used today, showing that pulses of radiation going into the eyes, and then it was used as a party trick to make people dizzy and fall over, give them epileptic fits, make them lose their temper. But the pulses used in warfare, even in the Cold War, they could mimic the same symptoms in the body as morphine, marijuana, hunger, hopelessness, which would be suicide, aggression, and if you put the right pulse frequency in, that would become sexual aggression, hallucinations. They could just make you just want to lay down and not move. In fact, there was a scientist at Yale University, and I'm putting it politely, I think he was expelled because they weren't happy with where he was going, called Jose Delgado. And he wrote that any moods or feelings could be induced in the body, and he used all sorts of electromagnetic waves, including microwaves. And from Yale, he went to Spain, and he could make, using his microwaves, he went into the bull ring, and he could make a charging bull just stop. And he said, he demonstrated that he could make women sexually amorous. He could make men smash up the room they were in. As he said, all moods and all emotions can be induced. Now, that was back in the 70s. Now, you imagine what they can do today.
Yeah, obviously. Now let's have a look at outer space. In near future, a radiation field is supposedly to be built up for the Earth's surface from outer space by means of thousands of satellites. In your opinion, is it technically possible to comprehensively irradiate the entire Earth?
Absolutely. And I can tell you why. And there are different layers, but about 60 miles up, you have the ionosphere, which is really layers of hydrogen and helium, which are electrical conductors. So what you can do, and it is already done today in fact there are 16 to my knowledge, there are 16 devices on the planet now, and using simple geometry and refractive index, the most famous one is HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, in Alaska. No, not Alaska. Is it Alaska? But North America. Is HAARP. And what you can do is you can beam microwaves and pulse microwaves anywhere on the Earth, because the ionosphere will reflect it, reflect the microwaves, just like a mirror will reflect light. And in fact, you can. So the United States, if they wanted to, they could send a beam of microwaves into the ionosphere. They could reflect it down onto your trees, onto your cattle, onto your crops, and they could destroy them. And there is no reason why this would not work. And if you send up several, in fact, they're talking hundreds of thousands of satellites. And what you can do is you can microwave the whole planet. I mean, when you think you've now got sky satellites up, which supply television to sort of whole countries with huge footprints. Now, once you've got all these satellites up, and they're talking hundreds of thousands, they are overlooking two things. The first is they are going to destroy every single living plant on the planet. Every single living plant. And this is and I think this experiment was done in Germany, actually, and was written up by school children. And what they did, they just got an ordinary, these walkabout phones where you just pick a phone up and you walk about the house. Now, they transmit, even if the phone is hung up, they transmit all the time, day and night. And what the children did, and it was in Germany, they grew some plants next to, or quite near, just one of these telephones that was plugged in, and they found the plants wouldn't grow. And it was a very weak signal. And their control, they grew plants outside, and they had watercress and all sorts of plants, and they found the plants were destroyed, and that has been duplicated and replicated. But you will first destroy every plant slowly over the planet, either because you will weaken its resistance to bacterium, or you will destroy the plant, probably both. You will destroy the soil, because it is plants that help keep the soil alive. The other thing you will do is you will destroy every flying thing on the planet, because at the moment they can fly to places where you can fly to places where there are no microwaves, and they can recover and they can breed there. Once you saturate the planet, they will have nowhere to go. But it gets even more serious than that. And the reason is, and a lot of people don't know this as far as the ecology of the planet goes, and that is that around 70% of a fish is tree. And the reason is that when leaves fall off tree in the autumn, they get washed down in the streams, the goodness, or they rot on the soil, and it runs by rain where it's dissolved. It runs into the streams. All of the goodness, all the leaves, goes down into the seas, into the lakes, into the rivers. There is an enormous food chain and food web, and the greatest food webs on the planet are in the oceans, and they start with bacterium. and it is the bacterium that eats the leaves that are eaten by other bacterium and bigger single-celled organisms, and so you move up the tree. But 70% of fish is a tree, actually comes from what a tree has discarded. So if you destroy the trees, you also destroy the fish and virtually every living thing in the oceans. But there is one more stage to this, and I'm sorry the answers are so long, but they're very important. You have bacterium floating on the surface of all oceans and seas. They're called coccolithopores. And coccolithopores are essential to your German survival for one reason, and that is they produce a chemical called dimethyl sulfide. That is the only chemical on the planet that is known to be able to produce, or which is used chemically in the production of clouds. They produce dimethyl sulfide. As we breathe out carbon dioxide, they breathe out dimethyl sulfide. They produce it as a waste product. It goes into the atmosphere. It mingles with chemicals in the atmosphere, and it is used, and it is the only substance used for cloud formation. Now, the coccolithopores are very, very sensitive to carbon dioxide coming down as acid rain or coming in as acid water. When you destroy the trees, by virtue of the fact that they grow, they take a huge amount of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and they use it with photosynthesis to make sugar, to make themselves grow, because it's what's inside all of their cells. When you destroy the trees, the carbon dioxide will increase on the surface of the oceans, and you will also have a cloud-less planet. So by putting these satellites up, and if the people thinking about this had more than 2 brain cells that they could actually connect together, and they asked any scientist with any knowledge what would happen, we could tell them. But if that goes ahead, then Earth is on a path to destruction, because satellites don't have off switches. You can't suddenly say, whoops, a bit of a mistake here. We need to go up and switch off 200,000-300,000 satellites, because when they're up and running, they're up and running. So the answer to your question, sir, for all of those reasons, is that you will destroy the planet and virtually everything on it, apart from bacteria.
Yeah. Allow me a more technical question concerning satellites.
Yep.
You said these about 60 miles up, there's this ionosphere layer that is
in stages. Yep.
That is in some sense conductive, and so I understand you can from the Earth send waves to this layer and have it the radiation reflected back to the Earth.
Yep.
But how can you penetrate this from above, from a satellite that is above this height?
Well, you can. It will go straight through. If it is above the ozone layer, you just aim it down directly. It will only reflect at an angle.
I see.
Rather like sunshine on a window. If the sun is directly on the window, it will come straight through. If the sun strikes a window, some of it will come through, some of it will be reflected. But there's an even more dangerous aspect there, and a lot of people say that this is already being done, is that if you beam microwaves down at a particular wavelength onto the planet directly, what you can do is set up standing waves on the planet, inside the planet, where the waves will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and mathematically and theoretically, it is then possible to trigger earthquakes. Whether this has been done, I don't know, but mathematically it is certainly possible if you set up standing waves to trigger an earthquake.
Yeah, I see.
Or change the weather. You can also change the weather by warming up the atmosphere and just changing one of the jet streams. And one of what people don't realize is that the Earth moves in cycles. You have the carbon cycle, you have the rock cycle, you have the ocean cycle. And some of these cycles are tens of millions of years. And when you start changing these cycles, because they are all interlinked, you can't change one cycle without affecting the others. You have the deep ocean thermal cycles. There are loads of them. And when you change one, you start changing all of the others. And what you could be doing, and oddly enough, there's a doctor who wrote this very recently, and I think it was only yesterday somebody said to me, a doctor, and I don't know his specialism, said that what we are doing is we are probably putting the evolution of the planet back about 2 million years. And that is on, and you don't have to, you can scrub this bit off, but if anybody wants more, a gentleman came here not too long ago, Sir Julian Rose. Sir Julian Rose came here. In this country, he's knighted by the Queen. And he is rather worried about this. And he was at my house here all day asking me specific questions on the environment. And he's put it on, I don't have a computer, he's put it on something called YouTube. And if you type in to YouTube Sir Julian Rose and Barrie Trower, it's Barrie, B-A-R-R-I-E, Trower, T-R-O-W-E-R. If you type that in the comments underneath is this doctor who said that you are, we're putting evolution back around 2 billion years, or 2 million years. And he's absolutely correct, because in answer to your question, it's what we are going to do. We are going to put evolution back at least a few million years, probably billion.
So concerning, just coming back on what you said about weather with these microwaves and this effect, standing waves, etc., one would be able, or one is able, to influence weather to trigger storms or such effects?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, weather has been changed already. I know it has. It's used in warfare. I do know, and they didn't use microwaves, but it's a similar process. During the Vietnam War, the Americans changed the weather over Vietnam so the Vietnamese could not get their supplies to where they were needed. Changing weather is a great specialism, and it is incredibly easy to do, and it's even easier with the machines like HARP, the big sort of 140 transmitter arrays. I think that it's 140, something like that, that they have. and it's incredibly easy. People have written books on it, on how you can change weather. But the problem is, when you've changed weather, you can't change it back, and that's the problem. I think this is one of the most, or the most dangerous thing now facing the planet. We've had something like this before, when the scientists tried to stop lead in petrol. And in fact, they took the industry to court. The petroleum industry took them to court. But the industry won with their very expensive lawyers. And the scientists trying to stop lead in petrol failed. And there isn't a single part of this planet now, from North Pole to South Pole, where you cannot detect lead from petrol that has been released into the atmosphere, come back down onto the planet, and they can find it now in the snow in the North Pole and the South Pole. There's not a single part of the planet that has been uncontaminated. And when you think of the lead in petrol, the danger that it's been to children's brains, asthmatics, the number of deaths must be phenomenal. Now, that was bad enough. This is going to be much worse by comparison. And just the other thing, if you do have scientists, and I do know German scientists are immensely clever, and some of the best research papers have come out of your country. If you have scientists who are listening and would like me to run through, if you'd like me to run through the parts of the brain that are mostly involved, or the cellular process, just for those, just let me know.
Yeah, thank you for this indication. We will come back to this. Now let me conclude a bit towards the preventive measures or protective measures that are possible. In a previous talk, you spoke about the fact that there are countries who want to protect their population from microwave radiation. Which countries are these, and what kinds of protective measures are being taken?
Right. Now, there are, in fact, 58% of the world are taking some sort of measures to protect their pregnant women and their children. Now, I have to be very, very careful here, because the moment a country says, we are going to do this, the industry moves in with lorry loads of judges and barristers and legal people and start causing trouble. I can tell you what has been published, and that is in China. For instance, if you are a pregnant woman in China, you have to wear a protective piece of clothing across your womb. And in fact, if you don't, you can be arrested. Very nice country, as far as I can tell. But you can be stopped in the streets by the police, who will say, show me your protective clothing. So they are protecting the womb. I do know in Israel and some of the European countries, that France in particular, that microwaves are being taken out, or have been taken out, of kindergartens, nurseries, schools, public libraries, colleges, universities, where young people study, or women are of childbearing age. I do know in the Soviet Union that they are physically going around pulling down transmitters, but they would do out there. They're not even bothering to ask. They're just actually going around pulling them down where they won't where they don't want them. Several countries are refusing smart meters on the grounds of the fact that they are far too dangerous, and the industry has been misleading people about their lethality and how they really work. And I'm trying to think of those, but I'm not sure I can. I know who they are, but I don't think I can say over the air. But you'll have to take my word that I do know there are several countries now refusing smart meters which are wireless. You can have smart meters, and one of the symptoms, one of the problem-solving cures here is to have a smart meter which is connected to fiber optic cable. Then there is no problem. The problem are the wireless smart meters, because they work on the Wi-Fi frequency, and the Wi-Fi frequency is a known and proven weapons frequency. But I do know 58% of the planet are taking steps to protect their countries, and that puts you in rather a dilemma in your German country, because if you do nothing, then what you have as a world situation is countries that are having healthy children born and their population increase, which means they are going to be looking for more land, and you have 42% of the planet where the population is going to be sick and decrease, and you are going to be vulnerable to immigration, mass immigration. And this was voiced by President Putin, and I have the document, when somebody said to him, something to do with the Cold War, would you ever envisage invading America? And he laughed and said, what's the point? He said, in 3 or 4 generations, they won't have enough people to build their nuclear power stations, build their rockets, run their atomic warships. He said, in 3 or 4 generations, anybody will be able to walk in. And he's absolutely correct. And this is where it becomes not an industry, we're going to make lots of money on this. This becomes then a political question on exactly, do you want to protect your country? And you find when you start looking, and I go back to my Cold War days, and the people that were arrested that I spoke to were commonly known as spies or traitors. The ones that sort of gave the spies the information were traitors, and traitors were the people who really sacrificed their countries for whatever reason they chose. Now, when you look in Germany, look at your decision makers. Look at the people who are actually saying, we will have smart meters, we will have this, we will have that. And then say to them, where have you got your information from that shows it will not harm this country? And they will point upwards to somebody else. And you go to them and you ask them the same question, and you will keep going up. And I have been to countries, and one of them was Malta. I have been to countries where only one person made the decision and signed for the entire country. One person. And in some countries, you find that, and it's to do with 58% of the planet, you will find that the person who made the decision for your country doesn't even have your nationality. They are a different nationality altogether, and they are advising people in your country on their benefits. But you're down to, when you chase it and get a good investigative reporter on it, and I bet you don't have more than 3 people in the whole of Germany who are making the major decision. No more than 3 people. And they are the ones, for whatever reason, are selling out your country, because they will know what they are doing.
Yeah, so that's already one point that is on my next question, that is finding out these responsibles in the background or high up who are approving of these things.
Well, I can tell you who it is. For Europe, there are 3 or 4 different bodies. The International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, and there are 2 others, but it's basically the same people who give each other jobs from one organization to another to another. And there are only organizations, and I think you're looking at about 24 people who are controlling 42% of the planet. And not one of them are elected. Not one. They are all self-appointed. Not one of them are elected. And I'm trying to think of the other 2, but I can't. But there are only 3, generally 3, and the main one is the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. And they are self-appointed people, and it started with, I do know that the head of one, or was the head of one, was the leader of the World Health Organization, and he was also, at the same time he was the advisor to the World Health Organization, Michael Rapaccioli, now I believe he's University of Rome. He was the chair of one of these committees, but also a paid consultant for the industry. And what you have is people who are self-appointed microwave experts setting a guideline. It's not law, it is a guideline that for some reason other countries choose to follow. And it's 42%. It's basically the Americas, Canada, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. They are under the domain of these 3 organizations. But you will find they are self-appointed, and they appoint their own ambassadors in countries. And because of the income, which is phenomenal, the governments are only too eager to believe them. And the other problem, sir, is that the big media barons that own the satellites and the television companies and the newspapers are also members of these people, or fund these people, or work with these people. There are very few, if any, independent media companies. There used to be hundreds of them that could tell the truth. Now, they don't tell lies, but they withhold the truth. That is the difference.
Just one last question. Are there any alternatives to this microwave system in order, if one wants to realize this technical purpose of connecting objects, connecting people in a mobile network?
Oh, absolutely. That is a brilliant question, sir. Absolutely. You do not have to have microwaves in the atmosphere. You could do away with all of them. And in fact, the system would actually work better. And that's the silly thing about this. You could have a better system with no fear of danger. And it's very simple. All you need to do is fit fiber optic cable from your computer to the transmitter. That is all. You take the microwaves out of the air. If you have just microwaves in the air for the military and the police, that would be insignificant. The power, although dangerous, would be so low, the risk would be worth it. But even then you don't need them, because you could use radio waves. You could come out and use different wavelengths. You do not need microwaves. You could use in the house, and you could use what they call Li-Fi or light. That would work. The only reason that you are using microwaves, and it's a very simple reason, is that in 1999, between 350 and 500 of the world's most powerful companies decided on that particular wavelength without talking to people like me, which is in fact the most lethal wavelength to cause brain damage. You have 500 of the world's most powerful countries that have now set up the groundwork and everything needed to get Wi-Fi everywhere, including smart meters. And what they can't do now, because the genie is out of the bottle, is say, whoops, I'm sorry, we're going to cause more suffering and deaths around the world than the plague of 1664 and 1340 something. We are going to cause more suffering and death than the plagues around the world, which they are. And so what they have done is they have built in exclusion clauses. You will find that the people that sign for these to be in their houses, in their schools, in their colleges, in their government buildings, the people that sign and to have the transmitters on their land, they take full legal liability. The insurance companies have pulled out. They did that years ago. And you will find that the companies now, the 500 big Wi-Fi conglomerates, the most powerful industries on the planet, they are now legally free because the liability is spread right across the populations. So they are saying now, well, you don't have to have it. You have it by choice, apart from smart meters. That is a sticky one where the lawyers would love to get involved, because with smart meters, they are saying, we are putting this into your house by force. We are putting this outside your house by force, and it could be the other side of the wall to a child's cot. They are saying, we are putting these everywhere, and you are going to be immersed in this mesh, which is a lot more dangerous than they're letting you know. That is by force. And that is a different kettle of fish, because I think they can then be taken to court and they can be tried. I don't know where the law stands on that. But the only reason you're having these is because of this conglomerate that is making, and I think today is worth 17 trillion euros. But everything could be safer, but it is less profit, because they would lose profit laying down the infrastructure for all of the fiber optic cable. They would lose profit developing the Li-Fi. They would lose profit changing to a different wavelength because all the operators would need slightly adjusting. So this is the most profitable one, and it is the most legally free one, apart from smart meters. And I suspect the people that have smart meters take responsibility when it's on their land. But there is the answer. You have the 500 most powerful countries saying, if you don't like it, it's your fault. And as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. We're really thankful that you could give us this time and answer these questions in such a detailed manner.